Never, in the significant number of years that I have lived, have I seen the level of violence and madness that is currently gripping the streets of our city. Not just Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Winnipeg, and so many other cities and towns are unprecedentedly dangerous. And the danger is to people minding their own business, not merely the teenage gangbangers or the criminals. I have always taken pride in living in a city where I feel safe walking any street at any hour of the day or night. It never occurred to me that our subways or streetcars were potential slaughter sites. What has changed? Well, endless authorities and politicians and social services speak of the need for more support for the mentally and the emotionally challenged, the traumatized, the drug addicts, and the victims of their upbringing. And the solutions are always to spend more money on housing and psychiatrists and community workers. And that undoubtedly is one answer. But when you hear the same authorities saying that the majority of school-aged children are suffering from mental problems, it is not a practical answer. So many of the street people complain that it's not safe in the facilities that are provided at great cost. The streets, the parks, and sleeping on TTC platforms and cars are seen as preferable. And yet, people die there as well. We have become a society that is so concerned about people's rights that we abandon them to those rights. There are people who are incapable of caring for themselves, incapable of making wise decisions, incapable of protecting others from their impulses. And yet, we stress their right to do and decide, whether in the parks, in the courthouses, or on the streets. Murder and assaults repeatedly record that the perpetrator was on bail, had ignored bail conditions, been charged and convicted repeatedly and on numerous charges, been released over and over again, had a history of mental health problems, declared not criminally responsible in previous cases, had repeatedly ignored the terms of probation, and so much more. It seems that the pendulum has swung far beyond reason and concern for the innocents. In another era, those who were homeless, raving at their devils as they wander, begging and stealing, defecating wherever they are, exposing themselves, incapable of finding a route to sanity or off their addictions, making decisions in their own best interests or were a danger to others, were sent to 999 Queen. There they were treated, fed, clothed, where it was ensured that they took their medications to keep their devils at bay. The result, they were safe, and the rest of us did not have to fear those who could not care for themselves, could not reason sufficiently to protect others from the delusions and fears that haunted them. We don't allow children to make decisions before they can weigh the merits and disadvantages, because we care for them and their well-being. We don't tout their right to not go to school, not eat their vegetables, or exist on ice cream alone. We acknowledge that our job is to look after them until they can look after themselves. Why then don't we have the same compassion for those whose mental well-being denies them that ability? Why do we insist their rights to self-determination outweigh their need for protection? Why have we abandoned them to the streets and to being a danger to themselves and to others? If we don't reverse this position and offer the loving care that they need to protect them from themselves, we are dooming them, and even worse, we're condemning them to being feared by society, ostracized and isolated. The subways abandoned by all who can afford to travel elsewise. The streets of our cities ever more dangerous. Schools and neighborhoods with shelters shunned by all who can live and do business elsewhere. Once again, the poorest of our communities paying the price for our wokenness. This is not a Christian or charitable response to those in need. nor is merely pouring money into the solutions that have proven inadequate or to be no solutions at all. We need to have the courage to say those who cannot care for themselves will be cared for by the community. We need to look back at the changes that have been made since we decided to close facilities providing secure housing for the mentally ill, and consider what has worked and what has led to streets that others fear to walk. That is the loving and caring that is needed, not the freedom to dwell forever in madness and fear and jeopardy. To each of us, the challenge to care enough to force our neighbors, our caregivers, and our politicians to review what is working and what isn't, and to provide the secure and meaningful facilities that are needed by those who cannot care for themselves, in the name of love, rather than abandoning them to rights that are so wrong for them. This is a challenge for each and every one of us. Nothing changes without an awareness of the dangers of the abandonment of those most vulnerable in our midst, and without each of us having the courage to speak out and demand that needed changes be made. Nothing will change. The choice is ours. So may it be. Amen. This is a call to exercising your faith on the streets of your city, of calling those who make the decisions to be responsible, of caring enough to take a stand. That is what Christ demanded when he called us to care for the least of these, my brothers and sisters. And in our society, although endless dollars are spent to provide for them, we do not provide the protection needed. And that is what Christ would have required of us.